I'm going to play a song.
Last night when they are sleeping, there came a dream so fair. I stood in old Jerusalem beside the temple there. I heard the children singing, and ever as they sang, I thought the voice of angels in heaven answered. I thought the voice of angels And then I thought my dream was changed, the streets no longer rang. Hushed were the glad hosannas, the little children sang. The sun grew dark with mystery, the morn was cold and chill, as the shadow of a cross arose upon a lonely hill. As the shadow of a cross arose
Good afternoon. Thanks everybody for coming. It's been quite a few weeks in the making, and I just want to say that, okay, he's telling me don't step off the step. We had 2,700 pictures. They are not all on this presentation. We picked quite a few. We have about 150 slides, but we are going to go through them probably in more rapid pace than you might prefer, but we don't want to keep you here all afternoon. A couple of things. Israel is a country of, what do I want to say? Contradictions. There's so many different factions of people in Israel, and they live together, but they don't like each other. And on the Temple Mount itself, there's 4 different, nationalities of people. And so there is a lot going on in Israel. The other thing is they are not, and I emphasize not, politically correct. They keep their men and women separate. When you go to the West Wall, the men pray on one side, the men pray on the left, the women pray on the right. Their children go to different schools. The guys go to one school, the girls go to another school. So they don't do the political correctness thing that the Americans do, and they don't apologize for it. So, we can't judge them based on our standards. And, Israel and the Jewish people are God's chosen people. And so it's, like I say, it's an interesting lesson in contradictions. The other thing that's so interesting about Israel is there are layers upon layers of civilizations there. You have 2,000 years of people living there or more, and they have what they call tells, and in those are mounds of civilizations that are just layered, and they just keep digging down and find the different layers of archaeology and identify them. So it's very interesting how they do all of that. And of course, science has so many different ways to identify and age things now. So that being said, did you want to say anything? So he said, we have ice cream downstairs and he wants to get this over with. So we thank you all for coming, and I want to say a special thanks to my circle, the Ruth Beal Circle. They have provided the ice cream and done all the work for having a little festivity downstairs after this is over. So please, when this is over, everybody come downstairs and have ice cream sundaes. We're going to celebrate. So let's have a prayer, if you will. Dear Heavenly Father, Ed and I thank you so much for the opportunity of having been in Israel and for what it has meant to us in our walk of faith. And we just praise you for who you are. Praise you that, we had no idea when we first signed up what this was going to be like. And we are still learning what impact it has had on us. So we thank you. We thank you that there weren't a lot of people in Israel when we went there, and there were no instances of violence while we were there. So we thank you for protecting us and watching over us. We just ask your blessings on this presentation, that it'll be for your glory and not for ours, and that in some way, someone will be touched for you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
now she's going to run out on me. This is at the airport in Dulles before we left. Okay. That's the whole group that went. There we are there, and on the plane in the middle. That's in Israel when we landed. This is Tel Aviv, the first night we stayed. This morning we got up the next morning in Tel Aviv. That's the Mediterranean Sea you're seeing there. Okay.
So this is Caesarea Maritima, and it was built by Herod. This over here, this right here is the amphitheater that's there, and they had chariot races, and you can see a little bit more of it here. And it was also the home, Caesarea Maritima was the home of Cornelius, and you remember he was the Roman soldier, and who Philip brought the news of Jesus Christ to. And so this is where Cornelius lived. And that is a picture of the entire Caesarea Maritima, and some of it's missing.
Right here is where they actually had the chariot races. They had a stadium there, I think it was there that would hold 30,000 people.
And that's another picture of the stadium, and it faces the Mediterranean Sea.
Okay. This is a stone. When they were renovating that amphitheater, they pulled this stone up, and you can't see it from here, but it's actually got Pontius Pilate's name engraved on it. And that is the only actual physical artifact that they have telling about Pontius Pilate. And it was actually used from scrap. It was built on something else, and they used that to build in the amphitheater. And it was turned upside down and used as a seat in the amphitheater. This one. This is right outside Herod's palace, and that is a public toilet. The spaces in between is where the water ran through, and you would put a cheek on each side. Lift up the robe, put a cheek down, do your business, get up and walk away. And the water would just take it with you. That's an actual public toilet from turn of the century.
We actually had to put pictures in to prove that we were there. You know, we want y'all to know we didn't just grab this off the internet. This is an aqueduct that was at Caesarea Maritima, and it was built from there to Mount Carmel, and because there was no water here. And they ran water from Mount Carmel all the way to Caesarea Maritima. And quite a feat of engineering. The water would run on the top, up on the top of it. And there's a little bit better picture of it there. And then this was a moat around it.
There's Barry's picture.
Okay.
This was there too at Caesarea Maritima, but one of the things about this is the arched way there. That is dated to the time of Jesus. Once the Crusaders came, the arches were more pointed. That's one way they could tell the age of the structures. And it's not in this photo, but the one thing they did mainly in Jerusalem, but all over Israel, if they found a historic site, they built a church on it. So if they, if this happened here, build a church on it, build a church on it, build a church on it. Then they tore the churches down in the Crusades and built them back up and tore them down and built them up, all within the Crusades. And most of the those sites are under the control of Franciscan monks to this day, from the time of the Crusades up to now.
A lot of places are either the monks or the, like the National Park Service in Israel, preserve the sites. This is the Valley of Jezreel. Does anybody know what the Valley of Jezreel is? It's where
Revelation.
in Revelations, this is where the Battle of Armageddon is going to take place. So we stepped on that soil. And it says in Revelations that the blood will run up to the bridles of the horses. So that's pretty deep. So that's the Valley of Jezreel. And this was...
We were on, I think it was Mount, which one? Mount Carmel. That is a statue of Elijah slaying the 450 prophets of Baal. And he actually pulled them down into the valley to slay them. But on top of that mount where we were is where the sacrifices were made to Baal, and they did not burn. But the ones from Elijah, even though he doused them with water, fire came down from heaven. That happened right there. It's just, when you're at a site like that, I cringe a little bit. It's like, that happened right here, Okay.
And that's another picture of the Valley of Jezreel. And so this is where the end of times will happen.
That's also where Saul had his final battle, in the Battle of Jezreel.
And Napoleon actually said that it was one of the best battlefields in the world. Most strategic, because there were mountains on either side, and it's like, it of course is in a valley. So that's us again. Proving we're there. Megiddo was part of the Valley of Jezreel. All of that was together, but it was a very large place. Okay. So this is, and I took this picture for a reason, because when we think of the manger, we think of a wooden structure that has points, and that's not what the manger was. This was a trough that they put water or food in for the cattle, and that's what Jesus would have been laid in. Not a wooden piece of structure. Everything over there is rock. Everything. They build their houses out of rocks. Their walkways are rocks. Their streets are rocks. So, and this was an altar to Baal. And they know that this was an altar because of the steps that were right here. Otherwise, it would have just, I don't know what it would have been, but they said that they know that it was an altar. And that's just another picture of a trough. Because I thought about baby Jesus laying in that, and that wouldn't be very comfortable, would it? He came into this world as a baby and went into a stone trough. One thing I want to say about Israel from me was that it was not for the faint of heart, was it, Rick? It was very physical, and I went knowing that. But God was with me and allowed me to do all but two things that everybody else did. But this was one of the things that I did do. And so I put these in here so you could see. all of these steps that we went down. And this was on the way back up. And I managed to do all of those with the help of a cane. My cane and I were fast friends.
You gonna tell them what it was? I don't know.
It was the water.
Yeah, that's, I'm not sure which this one, can you back up one? Right there.
There she is.
That, with the water systems they dug for the aqueducts and everything, they would do it like this, digging down, this thing hole would be full of water, and the caves down here is where the water would run through. And they would do it at a high spot, so gravity would it would follow gravity. Gravity would push it down the hill the way they wanted it to go. But that's how much work they put into digging these tunnels and these pits to have fresh water somewhere.
Okay.
We saw that.
Okay, this
This is Nazareth.
We arrived in Nazareth in the afternoon when it was about sunset, and that's what this picture is.
That's our guy.
And this right here is Shai, our guide, and he was not shy. He was Jewish, and if you ever get him as a guide, you will not be sorry. He was very well educated and a lot of history, and he gave us so much history I can't even remember it all. And this was at the top of that, overlooking Nazareth, but right here, I know, right here is the Mount of Transfiguration. You remember Moses was there, and Elijah and John. Elijah and Peter. Yeah. Peter, James, and John, and Moses and Elijah. So that, I never stepped foot on the top of it, but you could see it everywhere you went. So that to me was fascinating, to know that I was standing where they were standing, and you know, and I always think of that as, you know, Moses was there, so those people that were believers before Christ, that they were standing there, they were, you know, talking and walking. So those in the faith before Jesus are provided for somehow. I don't know how to explain that, but and that's us just sitting on the wall overlooking Nazareth.
Obviously that's modern day at Nazareth. If sitting there, you probably couldn't have seen Nazareth from where we, you know, the buildings, because it's a whole, you know, it's 20 times bigger than it was in Jesus' time. Still just overlooking Nazareth there. It's a Mount of Beatitudes. And you notice they had these little seating places at just about every place we went, and we would have a Bible learning at not every place, but just about every place we went. We would sit there, and we had two pastors with us, and they would relate what was going on in the Bible where we were at that particular time. So it was, you know, just fantastic learning about the Bible and where the sites were.
Same place.
Yeah.
This is inside.
It's like is that
That's the
Bethlehem?
inside. No, it's the inside of the Mount of
Okay.
Beatitudes.
The inside of you say they put a church on everything. So that is the Mount of Beatitudes, but that's a church on top of that. And this here, the road up to it, but they're dating it, and they're pretty sure that this is the gate that you hear about, the gates around. This is the gate that Abraham came through when he came into Israel. It's earthen, it's all made of dirt, but I mean, you go in, you have to turn and go around, and they had places up in the top inside where they could throw rocks on you or whatever if you tried to come in. But that was actual gate into Israel that Abraham came through. And this was some of the past walking through that. It was a nature reserve. Okay. This is, I'm going to tell you a story here, but I try to keep it as clean as I can. You can move on to another one. Right, just stay right there. In this area, this is Caesarea Philippi, and in this area it was mainly pagans there, and they liked to worship other gods. And the god that they worshipped up in this area was Pan. And if you're familiar with Greek mythology, Pan was a half man, half goat god. And this is what the pagans there worshipped. And this particular point right here is where at that time, the Jordan River started. The waters came out, the spring waters came out of the mountain and started the Jordan River. Right now it's about 50 yards further down, but that's where the Jordan River would start. And the pagans there would have wild parties. Let's just say they would have wild parties. And the purpose of those parties were to produce sacrifices for Pan. If you understand what I'm saying. Baby sacrifices. And this water was coming out of here. This is where the headwaters started. The waters would come out of here, and that rock would be the only thing visible. And this place is called the gates of hell because of this. And they would walk into the water with the babies, dispose of them on the rock, and the water would run into the Jordan River. And then the blood would run into the Jordan River. And down the river, just a ways, there would be some people standing, and they would continue to sacrifice until the blood ran red through the river. On this spot, Jesus was talking to Peter, and he said, "Who do they think I am, and who do you think I am?" And Peter said, "You are the Messiah, the Son of God." And Jesus said, "On this foundation, on this rock, I will build my church." Hard time saying it. "And the gates of hell will not prevail." And when he said that, I got shivers up my spine, because that was known as the gates of hell. And inhuman sacrifices were made right there. And Jesus said to Peter, it ain't gonna happen. It's not gonna work. It's not gonna win. We're gonna win. And I'm gonna build my church on you, and we're gonna win that battle over hell.
Yeah, and Rick Reams, stand up, Rick, for a second. Just stand up. Rick went with us on the trip, so thank you. He said to me, "You want to get your picture taken there?" And I went, "Oh, no. No, do not want my picture taken in front of the gates of hell." But then I got to thinking about it, and I should have taken a picture with my fist like this, saying, "You will not win." But one thing I want to say about that, and it impressed me when I was there, not only what Eddie said, but our culture today is doing the same thing with babies that they did, only not sacrificing them to Pan, but they're sacrificing babies for convenience. And it just struck me when we were there, how horrible the story was. But we need to think about how horrible the story is today, and it's no different. So that was it. We both had impressions there about the gates of hell. This is a museum we went in, and when they had a drought in Israel at the Sea of Galilee, the waters receded and this boat appeared. And this boat is over 2,000 years old, and it would have been one like Jesus and the disciples were in on the Sea of Galilee. They didn't want to destroy the boat by pulling it up out of the sand. It was in the sand. So they devised a plan to take foam and blow in foam all around the boat and shore it up. And then they brought in big equipment and raised the boat up out of the sand with the foam, and then brought it into the museum, and there's steel girders holding it together and whatever, and it's in a climate controlled area so it won't disintegrate. But that, as soon as we saw that, then we went to the Sea of Galilee, and we were there. This says right here, and I don't know if y'all can read it, but it says the Faith Boat. And it's a gentleman that is a Messianic Jew, and he's the captain and owns the company. And so 2 things he told us about that. And he said that during the pandemic, they weren't working. Nobody was there. We were one of the first travelers back in the country when we went. So God blessed us with that, because there were very few crowds where we went. But he said during the pandemic, he bought a boat. He said, I don't know how I'm going to pay for it. One company went out of business, and he bought their boat during the pandemic. And he said, but he bought that boat on faith. And so, go back to this. So, you see the American flag? We got on the boat, and they raised the American flag and said we were now in American territory. So I thought that was very sweet of them to do. And now you can go to the next one. He sang a song, and he made CDs and sold those. And then he turned off the engines, and it was sunset. This right here is Mount Arbel, and we just floated on the water, and there was no sound at all. It was just peaceful and amazing. So, and these are just pictures at the dock. One thing that it was hard when you looked out over the water, sometimes I couldn't tell where the water ended and the clouds started. It was just so close. This is Migdal Synagogue, and this is in Magdala. And this is where Mary Magdalene lived, or where she was from. And this is actually the synagogue, not her home, but the synagogue in Magdala. And these are the original mosaic floors. So that, stuff like that just kind of amazed me, that we were looking at the original mosaics that they had put in the synagogue, and we were walking beside them.
This is just another church, of course. They have thousands of them over there. But the boat right there is the altar. I don't know if you can see the microphones and all on it or not, and behind the glass windows is the Sea of Galilee. And so when it was at night, when daytime, you could be in there and see that boat, and it looked like it was on the Sea of Galilee. And that's where they had their services and all. And these churches love these paintings. They had paintings all over the place. And this is one is where she is touching the hem of Jesus' robe. I don't know if you can see her finger, but Renee did the same thing over here. But her arm is camouflaged, so you can't see it. But she was.
My finger touching Jesus' robe.
And this is going up Mount Arbel, the top of Mount Arbel. But they told us two or three or four different things over there that aren't quite what you say you heard biblical, and you have to take them with a grain of salt or whatever. But they said a lot of Israel looks just like that, rocks everywhere, and this was like on a cliff, and down below was just rocks everywhere. And they said they not only stoned people by throwing stones at them, they threw people on stones over the cliff onto the stone. That was how they stoned some people. Now, whether you believe that or not, that's totally up to y'all, but there was an alternative way of stoning people, was to throw them off of the cliff onto a stone. These are wild cows. They just roam around.
That's a picture of the cliff they would have thrown people over. Would you? So this is.
Well, you can start.
This is the Church of Peter's Primacy, and like Eddie said, everywhere there's a church that takes care of or is over the archaeological site. So they built the churches over the sites. They preserve the sites, but you have to go into the church or underground most of the time to see the sites.
And this one actually did both. This is inside the church and the mosaics they had there. But this church is from 1200. This isn't, Jesus' time. This is built over top of it like in 1200, during the Crusaders' time. But this is the rock inside the church and the rock outside the church. And this was run by the Franciscan monks, and we had to have special permission to go in there. But this is the rock that Jesus was sitting on cooking breakfast after his resurrection when Peter and the other disciples were on the Sea of Galilee fishing and didn't catch any fish. And he told them to throw it on the other side of the boat. He was on this rock cooking breakfast. And when they came in with Peter jumped in and swam in, and the others come in with a net so full it was almost breaking, but didn't break. That was right here on this rock. And the interesting thing to me is he talked to Peter then, and he said, "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter answered, blah, 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 blah. "Peter, do you love me?" Blah, 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 blah. "Peter, do you love me?" And now Peter's upset, but he said, "Of course, you know I do." But how many times did Peter deny Christ? How many times did Jesus ask him if he loved him? 3 times. Right there on that rock. Supposedly.
And that was the monk that watched over the monastery. He did not want to let us in, but our leader went and talked to him, and he actually let us through the gate so we could go down to the seashore. Oh. And this is a statue of Jesus and Peter, where he's saying, "Feed my sheep."
And that's the Sea of Galilee too, right there.
Right. And that's the Sea of Galilee. Now, right here, y'all think that Baptists only get dunked, right? Well, in the early church, they sat in this stone. There were 4 seats, and they would sit, and they would pour water over them. So they got baptized in the river too, but this was another baptismal, a way of baptism. I thought that was interesting. And that's just the same church, just a different view.
Look at this. Just look at this one close and tell me what it says. But how is it spelled? They didn't spell it the way we spell it now. It's got an H and an R or something. It don't spell it the way we do now.
It's because the Greek doesn't have that letter, why it's spelled that way. This is the synagogue at Capernaum. And Jesus stood in the synagogue and preached. And he also healed Peter's mother-in-law, who then served him food. And, oh, wait a minute, he wants me to...
What you're looking at on the left is a synagogue, but it is not the one from Jesus' time. This is one from sometime during the Crusades. But they sacrificed one corner of their dig of that synagogue to see what was under it. And this corner right here is the actual synagogue from Jesus' time. They can tell because it's a black stone. They age it that way. So that part right there, which was like another 10 or 15 feet down, is the actual Jesus synagogue that he was in Capernaum. And right across the street, and when we're talking across the street, we're talking from here to his chair, that was the street, was Peter's mother-in-law's house, where they went over there when she had the fever and he healed her. But, go ahead. That's in the same place. But this right here is a little bit interesting because in Israel, if you start a building project and you run into a ruin, you have to stop and let the government come in and assess it. If they think it's nothing, okay, you can go ahead and build what you want. If they think it's something valuable, of good, of interest, they will take the land and give you something else somewhere else, or a little or nothing for the land. So a lot of people don't turn them in. They just dig and cover them up. But this one right here is actually Peter's mother-in-law's house. I mean, directly across the street from the synagogue. But these girders right here are the building they built over top of it. Because they started building the place before they found this and made them stop. But then when they said they found this, they couldn't do any more. They built the building up. And this is actually underneath and covered up. But it's a brown, black rock that dates to Jesus' time. And they say it's Peter's mother-in-law's house, that Jesus healed his mother-in-law. And then she got up and started serving them. These are ruins around Capernaum. The whole place was full of ruins. There's ruins everywhere. That's a statue of Peter saying, "On this rock I will build my church." I think that should have been up in Pan, but yeah, they put them wherever they want. So these black rock, brown black rock are Jesus' time ruins from Jesus' time that were houses and all in the village of Capernaum.
So this was a house, and this was a house. This was a house. This, that might be a two-room house, and it went way back here and over here, and it went past here. So some of these places were massive, and that's another thing that just really impressed me is, you think that long ago it would be small, but they were not small places. And this is a wine, where wine would have flowed, where the wine press was, and that one I think was an olive press, but I'm not real sure. Okay. This was where they had the Syrian.
Okay, back in the 40s, this was actually a Syrian bunker on the Israel side, because it wasn't Israel then, but that's on the Israel side of the Sea of Galilee. And it was a bunker for fighting wars. And these are the rocks all over the place. And we rode by them, and there was a sign there that said, "Careful, landmines." They still had landmines there. And every now and then they said one of the wild cows would blow up. But they still had those landmines there today from back in the 40s. Oh. This is baptismal in the Jordan River.
Okay, so y'all have to understand, It was 42 degrees that day. It was cold. And they asked us, well, is everybody going to do the baptism? And everybody goes, no, I don't know if I want to go. It's cold, you know. And we're sitting.
We're sitting there and say, no, we didn't come this far to let a little cold keep us from getting baptized in the Jordan River. I don't care if it's 10, we're going out there.
Yeah. Well, before he said that, I was sitting in the bus, and this voice says to me, I will keep you warm. In my head and in my heart, I was sitting there, and God said to me, I will keep you warm. And so when I walked down to the water and went under and came back up, I was warm as toast. God had done what he said he was going to do.
Back up one. See if that one will play. It won't?
We had a video of me actually going under, but it won't play for some reason.
But this was probably one of the most commercialized places we went to because of the handrails and all for safety and everything. But that little bitty robe and a towel cost $13 to rent.
But those of us who took the plunge that day were really glad
That's
we
the one
did.
right there, Don.
Go down to the bottom and hit the bottom of the picture. I don't know if it'll play or not.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, it'll play. It won't play up
Like on the
here.
computer, but not on the screen.
Yeah.
I don't understand why. Okay,
So anyway, it was cold.
move on.
Oh, there it goes.
Oh, there it goes.
You see me?
The guy in the middle there, he's the pastor from Red Lane Church, Baptist Church.
James Taylor.
And the one with the sunglasses on, he was the pastor at the Eastern Shore Church, Baptist Church.
in Virginia Beach. What's Ron's?
Ron Jones.
Ron Jones, Dr. Ron Jones. So we had some very good Bible teachers on our trip.
Now they can't get it going again.
Yep.
Okay, there we go. You don't see me going under, so.
And these are just, and this is Rick over
Yeah, they're
here.
getting baptized.
There's Rick, right there. And this is the first glimpse of Jerusalem. We just came around the bend and they stopped at a little place for us to look at Jerusalem. Okay. We were not supposed to be able to go to Bethlehem. Bethlehem is Muslim controlled. And no Jews are allowed in Bethlehem. And our guide was Jewish, but he had a special permit because he was a guide and they would let him go in, but he couldn't guide or tell us any history while he was there. We had to have another guide. And this is Shepherd's Field.
Church built over Shepherd's Field,
Yeah.
where the angel appeared to the shepherds. This was actually inside a cave. They put like model there, what it would look like, you know, the manger and the angels and all of that in the field. And they asked us, you've seen the Mediterranean Sea, you've seen the Sea of Galilee, and you've seen the Dead Sea. Have you seen the Red Sea? And I said, yeah, it's right there. But it was just on a post sitting there in the middle of some ruins. He said, now y'all have seen the Dead Sea, or the Red Sea too. I don't know what that is. No, this is back.
Okay, this is still Bethlehem. Yes. Yeah, and this is at the Dead Sea. This was our party patio at the Dead Sea, but we got there so late, we couldn't have a party. We had a huge balcony.
That balcony is actually bigger than our room.
And this is a view from our patio at the Dead Sea. And those of you who don't know about the Dead Sea is 30% salt. And it's at the lowest place in the world, the lowest below sea level in the world. But when you go out in the water, it's supposed to, well, it is very therapeutic, because I floated in it for 20 minutes and didn't have to use my cane the whole day. It was great. I would have stayed there 2 or 3 days. But you walk out in the water about knee deep, bend your knees, and you just float. Have a hard time standing up. So where he's standing was the view from our, one side of our balcony, and then this is on the back side of the balcony, so you can see the difference in the topography. It's very stark. And there we are, floating in the Dead Sea. And it was 40 degrees that morning too. Yeah, and I said, I'm not coming to Israel and not floating the Dead Sea. So, this is a partially restored Khorasan synagogue, and it's 4th century. Everything here is original, all of the columns and everything. This is Betsy.
Okay. Well, yeah, this is a Bet Shean, but they had an earthquake here, and everything here is, you can see the architecture is round. It's from Jesus' time or before. But the earthquake, everything that laid down is exactly the way the earthquake left it. Mm-hmm. This is the marketplace in the city. This one over here is, I think the Crusaders left this. But this part right here is the marketplace in the city.
And those are the original mosaics that we're walking on. These are just pictures of the countryside, and everything's intermingled. So you've got, regular countryside and people living in the middle of all of the ruins and the archaeological sites. And these were just some pictures of the scenes. This right here is the place where Jesus was baptized. So this right here is Israel. This right here is Jordan. And they had officers on each side with AK-47s and marching back and forth. And somebody asked me, were you scared when you saw all those people walking around with guns? And I said, no. I felt very protected because they were watching out for their borders. They were watching out for their, the people in their country. When you become a soldier in Israel, they issue you a gun, a rifle, AK-47. You go to sleep with it. You take it to the restaurant, to lunch, to bed. And if you are caught without it, you go to prison for 7 years. They don't mess around. They can't. I mean, they're surrounded by people that are their enemies. They're smaller than the Israel is smaller than New Jersey. And they're the smallest Middle East country over there. So, you know, you've got Jordan, Syria, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is down here, Syria is up here, and Lebanon is over here. So they're surrounded by enemy factions, and they take their security very seriously.
They have no natural resources there. Israel doesn't sit on a pocket of oil or anything. Their resource is tourism. And so they take care of the tourists very well, because that's where their main income for the country comes from, foreigners coming over to visit. Everything is set up over there for tourism, and they take care of the people and they protect the people as best they can. Better than we would. They make sure everything is, they don't want to lose any tourists. This is one place where we had lunch. It's a huge tent. We had lunch at different ethnic places every day. So
That's right.
that was one of the natives. No. You like Masada?
This is Masada, and Herod, wasn't a nice guy. He was paranoid. He was mean, and Herod built Masada, and he had like 5 or 6 different palaces in different locations all over the place, because he couldn't, he was afraid he was going to be people overthrown, and so he had palaces everywhere, and they were huge. And if you know anything about architecture, people still study Herod's architecture to this very day in school. But this
one in particular, he never went to it. He had it built so he could escape to it, but he never went to this place.
So go back one. So this is what it would have looked like. There were 3 different layers, and this is one of those layers right there. Okay. And so when you look out across here, this was at the top of Masada. And go back a couple to the first slide, right there. We had to ride a cable car up. So it was a place you couldn't get to real easy. This is, this right here is that right there. So it was very high up. Okay. And that's just, now this is just some of the topography and some of the landscape. This right here is a ceremonial bath, and Herod had those in his palace, even though he didn't really practice Judaism very well. Okay. These are all pictures of Masada. And like we said earlier, we would sit and have Bible teaching in different places, and they would tell us about, what was going on in the Bible at the time, or who was involved. This one right here, the people that were on Masada, you want to tell that story?
I'll try to. Herod never went to Masada, but when they had the Jewish revolt, a bunch of people did escape to go there. This place was built to hold 50 people, and it was close to 1,000 people took refuge in there. And they stayed there for quite a few years, unknown to anybody. They didn't know where they were. They didn't know they were there. But they finally did find them. The Roman soldiers found them, and it took them quite a while to figure out how to get into it, because it's so far down in the front, but around the back, it was only like 450 feet down. So they figured they could attack from the back. Now, the people there knew they couldn't resist the Roman army, but they were not going to give in to the Roman army. or be taken captive by the Roman army. So they all got together and devised this little plan. If you take it whichever way you want to, this is a true story. You take what they came up with in your own mind, if you would agree with it or not. But they decided they would not give in to the Romans, so they drew straws, they had a lottery or whatever, and one man lost. And then everybody went back to where they were staying, and he would come to the first family and kill them all. And then he would go to the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one, and then his own. And he was the last one. So one man committed suicide. Everybody else was killed by somebody else's hand.
And they said that they wanted to do that because they didn't want the Romans taking their lives.
We had two buses there, and the guy for the other bus was also Israeli. And he was in the Israeli army, like every Israeli is in the Israeli army, male anyway. And they take the whole army up there, once they get out of basic training or whatever, up to Masada. And they have a ceremony up there, and they chant, Masada will never fall again. Saying they will protect that piece of land with their lives. All of Israel is what they mean. Israel will not fall again. And they take that extremely seriously.
So these right here, when David talks about running from Saul, these were the caves that he escapes to. And there are hundreds of them all over. And so they look small here, but on the inside they're pretty large. But that's where David, and yeah, we don't know which one he hid in, but it was a cave like this. And this is just in a place called En Gedi. What happened at En Gedi? I forgot.
That's where the waterfall is.
Yeah. Okay. These are just the goats that would roam. A lot of the people here are shepherds, but you see the goats climbing on the hillside. But that's where David hid. I mean, that is some rough territory.
Go back.
No, it's the next.
That one right there just took off. Before she hit it, the camel was moving. But that's all right. The camel ride, really, it was nice, but it's no more than a pony ride at the fair. It basically looked like a pony ride at the fair, but I can say I rode a camel.
I just want to say I rode first.
See if that one will start, Don. We don't want to take too much time. We're already running. Don't worry about it. We don't want to run too much later. Just move on. She rode the camel.
It almost threw me off.
Camels, when they know what to do, when they sit and squat right down, you throw your leg over, as soon as your butt hits, they're coming up. Well, her butt hit, but she won't quite ready, so that it goes like this, and I thought she was going over the front of it.
I was very graceful.
You see, right there, I'm ready. And
I
I'm
would-
to her like I'm going to
Hanging on for dear life.
But see how high you are up on that? It's a little bit more than a pony.
Riding off into the sunset. Hi-ho silver.
Okay. Western Wall.
Okay, so this is the first glimpse that we have of the Western Wall. And this was a walkway into Jerusalem right here. And we had to walk through there, and we had to get scanned by soldiers, by metal detectors and everything before we were allowed in the city. But this is the Western Wall. Now, if you looked this week at a picture of the Western Wall, it was full from here. That whole entire courtyard was full of people because Ramadan, Passover, and Easter all happened the same day this year. So, and I think I'm really glad I was there when we were there and not there this week. This is on top of Temple Mount.
This is also, well, I didn't know it before, but Temple Mount is Mount Moriah. You know what else happened on Mount Moriah? I didn't know. That's where Abraham went to sacrifice Isaac, the same place. And Temple Mount now is Muslim controlled, and it's called the Temple of the Rock. Because they have a rock in there with an imprint on it, and they say that's where Muhammad left the earth, and he put his footprint in the rock. But that's all Muslim. But I didn't not know Mount Moriah was the same mountain that Isaac was going to get sacrificed on.
And where the first temple was built. So this is Temple Mount. And because it's run by, and that's the Dome of the Rock is what they call it. But all of this is run by Muslim. I couldn't hold his hand. He couldn't put his arm around me. You weren't supposed to have Bibles while you were there. They could throw you out if you mentioned the name of Jesus. And so our guide said, I don't care, you can mention the name of Jesus. But, yeah, but they were very strict. We got a couple, because a couple of the steps I needed help on, and I got some dirty stairs because he helped me. But, and this was at the Pools of Bethsaida, is what that's a picture of. It's not a very good picture. You can't really tell. But that's where the people would go to be healed, if you remember that in the Bible, and the angel would stir the water.
Did you see the laundry in the back?
Yeah, and I took this because this is how Israel is. It's people living their regular lives with their laundry out, and then you're at the wall at, Jerusalem. So, and this is, I have to look. Okay, I've forgotten what this is, so move on. And these are just some scenes from the courtyard in Jerusalem, and we had lunch out in the courtyard. Some more scenes of Jerusalem and the shops. I'm sorry, what? The food was good. Every place we went, we had great food.
Depending on where you were at the time, like we had lunch every day at some type of ethnic restaurant, and it was good. They would give you, they called, I can't remember what they called it, was just flattened out chicken fried was one of their meals, and another one was what do you call them? Waffles. It was like a hush puppy, but it was vegetables and stuff in it, and you were supposed to take that and put it in pita bread, and they give you all kinds of olives and pickles and pickled onions and all that kind of stuff to put on top of it. But the hotels, you got basically American food because it was all buffet. They wanted to get you in, get you out. They didn't want you waiting around ordering and all that stuff. Everything was buffet style in the hotels to take care of tourists. But the afternoon lunches, they were real good. I enjoyed them, but it seemed like everywhere we went, that's what they wanted. Everywhere we went, that's what they wanted to give us, the waffles. But you got a little tired of them after a while. Or fish. One place had fish and rice.
Lots of rice. Okay.
This is going up, I can't remember what the mountain number is.
Yeah, but it's going to overlook the Eli Valley.
It overlooks the Eli Valley, and that's where, when we get to the top, the side, that's really, take another one. That's all the top. This right here is overlooking the Eli Valley. Where we are right here on this side is where David and, Saul in the army was, and David was a young shepherd boy. On the other side, on that mountain over there, is where the Philistines were in Goliath. And they would get the armies together, come down the hills in the valley every day, and they would taunt them. They would all turn around and go back until David came, and that's where David slew Goliath. That's, again, looking over the city of Israel, the old city, Jerusalem. This is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre?
Yeah, this is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and you had to bow down to enter into the church. You almost had to crawl into it right here. That was the entrance. And this is what you saw once you got in there.
This church is built over what was originally, and still what some people believe, is the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. The church built on top of it. Very, very ornate down in there. Right there, this building right in the middle is housed, where we're going into over on the left, that housed what was supposed to be, what they believe is the cave or the burial tomb of Jesus. But this whole place, they built like 2 dome churches over it because they thought, the Bible says he was buried real close to where he was crucified, so they put it all right there together in this one church. And that is an outside wall.
I think this is the southern steps, the wall of the southern steps. And yeah, so this is the southern steps, and let's see, right over here, see these steps right here, and we're sitting on the steps down here. They were all different sizes. They were wider and shorter and taller and shallow, and and the whole way up they were like that. They were all different sizes, and they said that they did that because this is where the pilgrims would go into the synagogue, to the temple, and they did that to slow them down before they got to worship. And because they had to concentrate on how they were walking into the temple, and it would slow them down. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Now this, like we said, some places they say, this is the place, and another place says, this is the place. Well, actually, I felt like this was the place. But this is Golgotha.
Right here, that's the mound of the skull. You can see there's an eye here, and this is where the nose would be. They said the nose was here for the jury area a few years back. But that is Golgotha. There's no doubt about it. That is Golgotha right here. You hear it in the Bible. The eye here, and nose was supposed to be here. It fell off, but that is Golgotha from the Bible. There's no disputing that whatsoever. That is the mound of the skull. This right here is the tomb they have found. This part right here had been repaired, and the doorway would have been about this high, so you would have to duck down in it. But this is the second spot that they believe is the burial place of Jesus. And to us, it felt more likely that this was it than the other one. And This is the tomb where he would have been laid right here. And there's an actual trough right here. You can't see it too, but the steps go over, but there's a trough here where the stone would have rolled. And I always pictured the stone as a big boulder, but the stone was not a big boulder. It was more like a millstone. It's flat on two sides and round, so it would roll. And they could seal that, with seals, be flat up against the wall. But they actually had a stone on the other side over here that wasn't original, but it was original for something, but not for this tomb. But we didn't take a picture of that. We forgot. But. Okay, it's your turn.
Okay, so these were the tunnels that went down to the original wall of the first temple. So we actually got to put our hands on the original wall of the first temple that was there, or the Herod's temple. It was Herod's temple because the original one was destroyed. But this is where we went down the steps. And this is where we walked through, and it was narrow.
This is the actual path some of the pilgrims take now when they come to worship. They come this way on purpose.
They have another one called Hezekiah's Tunnel, but that carries water, and so most of the time you have to wear boots and everything in there. So we didn't go through that. This is one of the stones in the original temple wall of Herod, and it is 40, yeah. Yeah, that one.
They have one that's 14 meters long. You can see it better. This is not it, but they had an actual stone, one piece, one stone, 14 meters long. 41 meters long. And when Herod had the stones put in, he put what they called a picture frame around them. He would carve in like a 1/4 inch deep all the way around it, so you would know it was one of Herod's stones.
That's Jerusalem.
We were getting ready to, I think we were getting ready to take the Palm Sunday walk on the top of Mount of Olives down. This was a look at it from the top of Mount of Olives right there into the old city. Yeah.
This is
Yeah, the chapel that's on the top of the Mount of Olives. They built churches everywhere. That's one of the natural resources I get is churches. They built them everywhere.
That's inside.
Inside that church.
And that's inside of the altar.
Looking through the window toward the old city. And we're walking down the pathways here that don't look anything like they would at Jesus' time, but this is the route Jesus took when he was on the donkey coming in Hosanna on Palm Sunday. And these are interesting. These are boxes of bones. When you were put into a tomb, you would only be in that tomb for 1 year, long enough for your body to decay. Then the family would go back, have a ceremony, and put the bones in a box, and then somebody else would use the tomb. And so these are old bones from old tombs. And this is a Jewish cemetery here, and they had the rocks on top of it. And every time they would go visit, they would drop a rock on top. So the living are visiting the dead. The living are taking care of the dead, or they had to put a rock on top of it to symbolize that. Yeah, more Palm Sunday walk. This is the Garden of Yosemite here. They have some very, very old olive trees here. Like the one you see here, these are olive trees. I think this one is, they said, the oldest olive tree in Israel, at least. It might be the world, I'm not sure, but really old olive tree. Bible learning in the Garden of Yosemite. But before, when we were back at that other tomb that we thought was the real tomb, we actually had communion in between the tomb and Golgotha. and a Bible learning right there. That was special. This is going into her church. I don't know.
This is a church, what they call the Church of All Nations. And
We're almost.
and I'm looking, and there's a famous mosaic on the front of it, but the church itself was designed by Antonio Barlucci, who was an Italian architect. And then this is just some more pictures of the same church. This was the inside, and that was a gate. That's a ceiling. I mean, they were beautiful. They were like churches you would think you would see in Italy. I haven't been to Italy, but I've seen pictures. But go back. This is the mosaic. It's and it was made by. See if I can read my writing. Giulio Bargellini, who was a famous artist.
We're getting there.
Garden of Gethsemane. And there's a picture of the church from up on the hill.
Yeah, we're actually right there in the bus driving up through the old city.
And that's an olive press. And this is a marketplace street, one of the original marketplace streets in the old city. And this is a new archaeological dig. They're everywhere. And let me go back to that one before it. Right here, and I couldn't make it bigger, I'm sorry, but right here there's a little guy that's like in this time frame that has a backpack on his back, and he's looking into the marketplace. And I said, well, why did they put the kid in there with the backpack? I thought that was interesting because see this right here is this right here. But this child has a backpack and he's in the ancient painting. And he said, we put him in the ancient painting so we will remember to tell our children the history of our nation. And I thought that was really, really interesting. They're all about teaching their children the history of what's gone on there. That's just a courtyard in the old city. You want to tell them about that?
These are ceremonial baths they've unearthed. Up here, you can't see it real good, but this piece right here, they found two of those, and those are about the size of a quarter maybe, and they're clay, and they were not the seal on your signet ring, but the seal that was made by your signet ring from Zedekiah? Zedekiah's secretary or something like that. They can actually, Jerubbaal, you can actually see it. We didn't see him, we just saw the picture. But they unearthed that in the digs right there. Further proof that this part right here is what they believe is the foundation of David's temple. That right there, they believe, is the David's palace, not temple, David's palace. With the ceremonial baths on the side and rooms for priests and all of this other stuff on the side. But that is supposed to be from David area. Davonic, however you say that. This is still, I mean, these haven't been unearthed but like 10 years, I think they said. But these are very new archaeological digs right next to, in the old city of Jerusalem. Which gate is that?
That's Zion's gate.
That's Zion's gate.
And I want to tell you something about this. This is,
See See the car?
Well, there's the car. That's how wide the street is. He had to bang the sides of the gate to get through it. And they said, you know, if you want to keep your car in Jerusalem, don't buy a good car, because the streets are so narrow. And so he was having a very hard time getting through that gate. But see all the potholes in the structure? Those are bullet holes. And somebody in our group asked him, said, well, why didn't y'all fix it, you know? Why didn't you smooth it over? And he said, you know, it was from the 1947 war, and they wanted to remember when they went through that gate what they had to do to become a nation. So that's what the bullet holes came through from.
At that time, this is the walls around Jerusalem. They were controlled by Jordan. Jordan was in control of all this because Israel did not exist until the next year. They just fired endlessly upon this wall, and while they did that, they rushed the wall. And so they, put up a covering fire and rushed the wall and went in and took it over. They kicked Jordan out.
These are just some more archaeological things going on right around
You could take
the wall.
10,000 pictures of archaeological digs and still not scratch it.
And this is the Church of St. Peter in Galactantu. This was supposed to be over the house of Caiaphas, the high priest Caiaphas. And so this part right here is part of the original church. And we went down in some caves. I think that's the next, right here. You go down in the caves. And so these were dungeons that were under the church right here. So, all right.
When the high priest sentenced you to something that kept you in these dungeons built out of rock underneath his house. This one right here, if you see up in here, the stairwell was not there in Jesus' time, but they suspect that Jesus was held at Caiaphas' house overnight before the trial. And to get in this dungeon at that point, you had to be lowered down with ropes. And the room wasn't as big as these two chairs and that table, square, and solid rock. Cold, damp, it was just not a nice place. And they would lower prisoners down through that hole in the top, and there was no escaping it. And they suspect that when Jesus was held in the dungeons, it was underneath here in one of these holding places. And they had to let you back up by ropes. It was not nice. That's a lyre. You ever hear of the lyre? David played the lyre? That is a lyre. Those are the steps here. These are the original steps to the high priest's house. And you had to, they actually gated them off. People were taking parts of them as souvenirs, so they had to board them off. You couldn't get to them. And this is a statue of Peter and the servant girl and a Roman soldier and the rooster crowing up above them. They told another story there. I don't want to keep all here, but our Jewish guide, his belief was that it was not a rooster that crowed 3 times. He said chickens are dirty animals considered unclean, and Jewish people would not have them. But the Roman soldiers had horns they would blow that sounded like that. And his speculation is it was a Roman soldier. But my speculation is it was a Roman soldier who owned a chicken. I do not go along with that part of his, explanation.
This is the Jaffa Gate. This is the Jaffa Gate, if you read in the Bible about the Jaffa Gate. And this is at the Western Wall. And so Eddie and I both took,
That's me.
that's Eddie right there. I am not in this picture because I was taking that picture, but this is the western wall, and we,
Women's side.
yeah, the men were on the left, the women were on the right. And you couldn't mingle. And we took prayer requests from our church family and our friends, and we prayed there quite a while and put the pieces of paper actually in the wall, in the crevices in the wall, with our prayers. So that was quite moving. And this is our group from Red Lane, from Powhatan. And this is Jonathan and me and Ed and James Taylor and Michelle, Rick's daughter, and Rick. And so we were the ones from Powhatan. There were supposed to be 150 in our group. There were 43. But we liked it that way. So, and that's...
That's all.
And they said, hallelujah, they're done.
She wants me to bless the ice cream. Okay, thank you, Lord, for this day and the opportunity to teach some people about Jerusalem, what you taught us, Lord, and to spread that and let other people live through us.